And thank you for joining us at this hour. Of course, we are going to be looking at all things the ANC National Conference at this hour every day for the next few days. We are going to be taking you down memory lane just to show you some of the key decisions that were made, some of the key moments that we've had, some of the difficult times that the ANC had to navigate as it found its way to conference. At the same time, some of the results and what it means in the context of where this party finds itself today. And this, of course, we are going to be speaking to our specialists here at the SABC. And one of them is specialist researcher Maswele Ralebona. And he's going to be reflecting tonight on previous conferences during the Zuma years. At the same time, we'll bring you SABC News social media specialist Stembiso Stole, who is going to be taking us through social media, reviewing some of what we are seeing on our social media spaces. Remember, the weekend was quite hectic. We saw quite a lot of ANC leaders hopping different provinces. What were they saying? How were these messages received? Stembiso has all of that for us on standby. But let's start with Maswele, who is standing with me here just by the video wall. Maswele, thank you so much for your time. We cannot talk about the ANC without looking at that moment in Polokwane.
Thank you, Wengiwe. Let's look back at the Zuma years. This was when the former president, Jacob Zuma, was in power after winning the race in Polokwane against former president Thabo Mbeki. And the Zuma years were characterized by many scandals, so to say. There was an Nkandla debacle where he was given his house or his home was built using state funds of over about 260 million rand were spent. And
interestingly, before you move on from that, it's that the ANC in parliament had to close ranks around this issue. Now the ANC parliament again closing ranks around Palapai.
And remember, this is happening despite the fact that when President Ramaphosa came in, we were the nation, or there was this hope that what characterized the Zuma years will not repeat again. But let's go back to our screen, Bongiwe. After President Zuma winning the race in Polokwane, President Thabo Mbeki continued as the president going into 2008. But this period between December 2007 and September 2008 was really charged in terms of President Thabo Mbeki clinging to power. Because remember, after that, there was Zimbabwe elections and there was ANC Youth League was already calling for Thabo Mbeki to be removed from the chair. Zimbabwe elections happened, and here we see, I remember former Jesse Duarte, by the time, the late Jesse Duarte, was the spokesperson of the ANC. And then she said, Thabo Mbeki visiting Harare, coming out and said there was no crisis in Zimbabwe, was not the position of the ANC. So Thabo Mbeki is not representing what the ANC stand for when he said there was no crisis in Zimbabwe. That followed by during the SACP, the tripartite alliance said in May, and what happened there was that SACP was calling for the removal of Thabo Mbeki immediately. It was followed in the same month, May, when there were xenophobic attacks in South Africa, which gave the critics of the former President Thabo Mbeki power to say, this man must go. Let's go to the second slide. You will see that by 16th of September, President Jacob Zuma, or former President Jacob Zuma, then he was not in power. He was still the president of the ANC, and then he called President Thabo Mbeki. He referred to the administration of President Thabo Mbeki then as a dead snake, saying there's no need to fight these people. They are as good as you fighting a dead snake. And 20 September, Mantashe announced that Mbeki will be recalled. Followed 21 September 2008, Thabo Mbeki announced that he handed over a resignation letter to the national speaker of the parliament, by then Honorable Baleka Mbete. 25 September 2008, Mutante was elected in the National Assembly as the President of South Africa. Let's go to the next slide, Bongiwe. Then we look at 2010. A spat started between Gwede Mantashe and and the ANC Youth League. You remember ANC Youth League then was led by Julius Malema.
And quite charged up.
It was quite charged because Julius Malema was, he didn't care who you are during that time. As a result, Julius Malema was charged for bringing the ANC into disrepute. Going to 2010, was found guilty and was told to apologize, including to former President Jacob Zuma for referring to him as worse than Mbeki, and many other charges that were there. 2011, we saw Malema being charged again. This is the ANC that was taken by former President Jacob Zuma, because 2009. President Jacob Zuma became the president, and then after, you'll remember that part of the reason why he didn't ascend to power immediately, it was because he was still facing charges of arms deal, of which Mokotedi Mche, the then NPA head, dropped the charges, clearing the way for Jacob Zuma to ascend to power during the election 2009. Let's look at the next slide.
And of course, I mean, you know, with this one, when you look at what happened, even as we move on to the next slide, then after, you know, Malema is charged again, we then saw quite turbulent times emerging, you know, within the ANC, even to a point where we saw the expulsion of Julius Malema.
Yes, come 2012 March, Julius Malema was expelled. This after charges were leveled against him again, and then there was no way. They said no more. He appealed the decision. He came up with other letters. I remember 2012 conference in Mangaung. Julius Malema wrote a letter asking for the ANC to forgive him, hoping that former Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe would win over Jacob Zuma then, because Motlanthe seemed then not to be in favor of Julius Malema being expelled from the ANC. But come 2013 July, Julius Malema, seeing that there's no hope in going back to the ANC, he forms the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, with other members of the ANC Youth League that followed with him. This is the second breakaway. This is the third breakaway party from the ANC during the democracy. First one being the UDM, second one being COPE, and this one, let's say, I can say the third biggest breakaway. Yes. Then October 2012, former public protector Chulima Donsela opens an investigation on Nkandla. You remember I mentioned Nkandla at the beginning. And 2016, the state capture report was released October by the former public protector again. This again is on the Zuma card.
And the issue of state capture became so big that it became one of the moments you know, when people think of characterizing the Zuma years, it always is right up there at the top.
Bongiwe, if you remember very well, the Zuma years were referred to, or some people still refer to them as the 9 wasted years. When you check what happened, if you read the state capture report by the current Chief Justice, it shows that during those years, state-owned entities were turned into piggy banks for Zuma, for people who were linked to former President Jacob Zuma. That's the state capture report. You know, Prasa, Transnet, SABC, Dinel, some of them are dysfunctional even to this day. You've got ESCOM now. We know what the biggest problem with ESCOM. So the Zuma years were highly charged. During the Zuma years, that's when we saw lots and lots of civil society organizations coming up to denounce Jacob Zuma, saying the president must go, the president must go. Up until 2017 December, when Ramaphosa, the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, took over won the elections against Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. And then the first thing that the administration of Ramaphosa, notable thing that the administration of Ramaphosa did, that time he was not even the president, but he forced his hand to remove or fire the board of ESCOM. And when you check at that board, what it was, the people who characterized the board was mostly people from business. Forcefully, Jacob Zuma resigned in 2018, And
I remember that moment when he stole Valentine's Day.
exactly. I wanted to talk about that. It was on Valentine's Day when Jacob Zuma announced that he's resigning, and then it was followed by Ramaphosa, President Ramaphosa, and Didi Mabuza becoming president and deputy president. And here we are. We thought during this period by now, the state-owned entities, ESCOM, especially ESCOM, and others would have been stabilized, so to say. But we know what is happening in the country as we speak. The biggest topic in the country right now is ESCOM.
And it definitely is ESCOM, and a lot of concern even around whether or not, those deployed by the ANC to mend the challenges that we are facing at ESCOM understand what really needs to be done there. Because essentially a lot of people are seeing it as if it's a battle for positions, and yet not an understanding of governance.
It appears that in ESCOM, the current ESCOM, if you look at it, it's highly charged. Everyone is looking at it, the contracts, the dysfunctionality, while billions and billions of rands are being spent. And if you check the previous financial status of ESCOM compared to financial status of ESCOM today, is becoming even worse every day. But contracts are still being dished out. Diesel is still being used more than what it used to be. The approach, so to say, by the current administration at ESCOM and in government is mostly about business rather than a social approach to these issues.
And it's going to be interesting as we look at all of this during the course of the day.